Hey, welcome back to NextWealth Insights. My name is Heather Hopkins, founder and managing director of NextWealth. I'm joined by my co-host, Alistair Walker, managing director of HNW and a chartered financial planner. Hello, Alistair.
Hi, Heather. Great to be back for another episode. Long live the humans. We've had some AI podcast hosts in recent episodes, and I'm glad to be back in real time. I'm really excited to speak with today's guest. I'll let you introduce in a minute, but as always, before we dive in, I would like to thank our sponsors. They make this podcast and the AI Lab project possible. So thank you very much, SS&C. Fidelity, Aviva, and Salesforce. Over to you, Heather.
Fantastic. So we're doing another demo today, which is great. We've got Gary Abella, who's the co-founder and chief commercial officer at LoA with us. Gary, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Heather and Alistair. Delighted to give you guys a quick demo of LoA. So what you see here on the screen is our first starting point. It's a very simplistic interface. It's been designed specifically for a very targeted part of a workflow within the advice journey, and specifically around letters of authority. So just from the get-go, this is ultimately helping people with extracting information from the policy documents you receive at the end of your LoA process. So it doesn't solve the need to retrieve the information from the provider and the complexities around the timescales it takes providers to give the information in the first place. Sadly, AI isn't a solution for that industry-wide issue, but we hope to show you through this demo how we can help on the margin and improve the time it takes to complete information extraction from documents such as DC pension schemes, investment ISAs, GIA, investment bonds, etc. So I'm going to take you through how the system works, and I'll start a new process. And so with our integrations with IntelliFlow, Planner, which is coming up in the next couple of weeks, Xplan is on our roadmap for hopefully by the end of the year, and Curo, etc. You'll be able to automatically pull through the client details directly from your client records. But in this instance, I'm going to set that up first and foremost. And what you'll see here is some standard default checklists that we have built in. You'll see there's a combination of checklists in beta and ones that are active in the broader market. We always work on trialing out our new checklist in beta first, and we make that available to early development partners before we actually release to the wider market. And the reason for that is we always want to be at least 90% accurate with all of the answers that we give before we make it available to the broader market. And so we can customize these checklists dependent on whether a firm wants specific questions added or removed, or have an entirely unique, should we say, template for how they have to extract information within their process. So I'm going to use DC as the default. It's one of the 80% of all LOAs tend to be for a DC pension consolidation piece of work. And what you'll do there is you're able to upload the document. It can be a PDF, a CSV, a scan. It can be 10 documents. It could be one document, whatever is required for the case at hand. Also, with our integrations with the CRMs, we are working on second round integrations where we actually also pull the document directly from the systems. And it's as easy as that to get a case going. And so what you'll see here is now we're starting to process that information on the files that you've uploaded. And this will take about a minute 20 to complete. And so whilst it's going through that, I'll just explain some of the core technology that sits behind it and why we believe there are some key USPs in how we approach document extraction versus some of the other standard tools that you can get from the market. So from the get-go, I want to highlight the fact that you can see here the files that we've uploaded. This is specific to this particular case. And so there are necessary guardrails in place here to ensure that the model that is driving the extraction of the answers is only looking at information that you have within this document. If the information isn't found in this document, we will tell you that it's not explicitly mentioned. That's important for two things. Firstly, it shows you that we're not hallucinating. Hallucinations are a big part of the issues around using large language models for such tasks. And so where it's not explicitly mentioned, you can deduce one of two things. One, it's not available in the documentation, and then you have to go back to the provider to give you that information. Part of the problems with the LoA journey is that there's constant back and forth with providers. And what we try to do to edge on that first part of information gather approach is to try to eliminate the amount of back and forth by giving you the ability to at least filter by non-explicitly mentioned. So from the get-go, as an admin person or a paraplanner, or even dare I say an advisor doing this task, you can make that one call to the provider and request the following information that they've inevitably not sent you. Part of the industry-wide issue here is that regardless of what you request, you get a standard pack back. And unfortunately, those standard packs don't often give you all the information that you need. And so that's just a useful feature, shall we say, that enables you to actually streamline information gather. And so whilst I was explaining that, you can see that we've already now populated all of the answers that are available in our standard default checklist. And so why don't I go through one example for you just to show some of the other features that are relevant for this use case. And so the algorithm has been able to actually extract the fact that the scheme's next retirement age is 65. And so to build trust into the system, we actually also give you the source document on the right-hand side and highlight exactly where on the document we have found that information. So that enables you to have a human that's in the loop of this workflow and double check that the answers are in fact correct. I would like to add also here that where the answers aren't specifically mentioned word for word, we will show you that the answer is derived from the whole content of a particular page. That is important because it demonstrates the sophistication of the system that sits behind this. This is an evolution of, entity recognition. It's actually utilizing large language models that are locally hosted within the software. And so no data leaves the confines of the application or our UK servers. And so what we do there is we're able to understand the contextual basis of the question and be able to search through all of the different pages in the document to generate a one-word answer based on information that's not necessarily been given in a one-word response. And so there is a lot of domain understanding that we've baked into the model that's locally hosted in this product to ensure that you're getting high, reliable, accurate results every single time, irrespective of the document that you put into the system. Now, Aviva that I'm using here as an example are actually a fantastic provider to work with. Their documentation is extremely clear, but some of the older schemes are quite complicated to understand. And so we have got the, should we say, the skill set to be able to pull out that information extremely reliably. I would add to this that we do pull out information like fund names and fund values. We're making a new release next week where we will pull out the ISIN codes and the TERs and the necessary charges. Our clients always request additional information. We're very happy to add additional questions to this if they're not available, because it's for the greater good of the entire community. From a DC perspective, we're pretty certain that we have got effectively 95% of all the questions anyone could possibly ask as it relates to the compliance file check. And it's as simple as that. It's there's a simplicity and a beauty in its simplicity. What you'll do then once you finish this workflow, so within 1 or 2 minutes of the algorithm extracting the answer, another human overlay of about another 2 minutes just to double check all of the answers and add information that's missing, you effectively press download, or as you see here, I'm showing you the IntelliFlow integration, upload it directly into the CRM system. The next phase of our upload back will also be to pre-populate plan details in CRM systems to avoid the rekey once it's in the CRM. And so what you'll see is, and if I share this example, output is a very simple, concise spreadsheet of your questions and your answers. So you've taken unstructured data from documents and you've given it structure by using AI to ultimately do that effectively and quickly. Going forward, we are going to be adding in client file structures, which will mean that if you have a client that has 3 or 4 different pension policies, you would want to see all of the different policy information side by side so that the power planner can then look at that and do the advice on whether or not a transfer out makes sense. And so what you'll see here is that in the next iteration, you'll be able to pull out all of the policies for that one client into the one spreadsheet. That's the end of the workflow as it relates to Real OA. It's simplistic by design, and it's a use case that we have thought long and hard about why to focus on. I can go into lots of different reasons why, but probably that's best for the discussion.
Gary, tell us a little bit about ReLOA and yourself. We've done a companion video along with this podcast, and we'll put a link in the show notes so that you can see a demo of ReLOA in action. But Gary, tell us a little bit about you and ReLOA.
Absolutely. So I'm one of those individuals that's kind of sat on both sides of the fence, both having worked for about 15 years in the financial advice space. I started my career at the Hartford selling unit-linked investment bonds to advisors before becoming the head of advisory sales for Legg Mason, which is a large US asset manager. And then I left the industry for about 10 years, wanting to focus and double down on technology, and specifically been running a AI boutique agency in Germany for the past 10 years, building very complex machine learning applications for large enterprises such as PwC, Mercedes-Benz, and BCG. So I bring both sides of that complexities of large-scale AI deployment, but then also marry that to the day-to-day struggles that financial advisors have to deal with. And so that's really where my mission is with ReLOA. It's how can we harness AI to streamline pain points, ultimately help advisors and their admin teams and power planning teams focus on delivering better customer outcomes by having more relationships with their customers and do more sort of high-end customer activity and reduce the mundane.
Interesting, because I've been 10 years working in AI. You're probably one of the only people who's been working 10 years in AI, right? So that's pretty impressive. But how did you settle on the LOA specifically? Because working in Germany outside of financial services, it's such a niche area. I'm just wondering why the LOA? How did you come across the idea?
Yeah, it's a great question, Heather, and it's I'd love to spend a bit more time on this. So, wanting to come back to the UK financial advisory space, one of the reasons I hesitated by not coming back sooner was that for twofold, really. Back then, large language models, ChatGPT, these types of, should we say, technologies weren't readily available, and so it was very expensive to build machine learning algorithms specific for a client. PwC spend millions every year on building their own custom models. And so it didn't make sense to come back to financial advice because nobody has the appetite to spend that kind of money on tech development. Fast forward to about 18 months ago, ChatGPT really blew up the AI space. I saw the opportunity to come back into the UK financial advice space and build my own product, not a product that I get paid to build for other people, but something that I can actually get behind. I've always wanted to come back to advice because I think the advisors are our unsung heroes in the industry, and the business model is inherently difficult to scale and do at scale because of the laborious amounts of processes and paperwork that we have to go through in this industry. So that's where we landed on the LOA problem. We went through the entire advice journey with some early development partners, from the client fact find, the first meeting, transcripts of the meetings, through to suitability letter writing, all the way down to looking at the annual review and compliance file checks. The reason I landed in LOA and document processing was because of that experience I have in building AI solutions at scale. We wanted to find a repeatable process that is consistent and standard across the industry, that also is something that we like to call a gateway use case. Something that actually already today doesn't mean you have to change the way that you work but simply have a tool that makes you do that faster and smarter. And so that's why we focus on this. It's objective. The answer is either right or wrong. It's not subjective. And I think in relation to AI adoption at scale, you have to find these use cases that really do, I think, capture the hearts and minds of an entire organization, and not just the few that are ready to adopt, because only then can we start to think about the cultural changes that are necessary to really become more efficient and AI enabled as a wider organization and an industry. And so, yes, it's very narrow. but it's very broad in its applicability in that, we extract information from documents in lots of different processes within our organizations and lots of different departments. And so I'm a specialist in document processing, and we will stay that way because we're not financial advisors. Financial advisors will be the ones that help stitch these component utilities together to eventually automate more complex workflows. But from experience, focusing on the low-hanging fruit and doing that at above 90% accuracy every single time is how I believe actually clients and firms, enterprises can start to adopt AI in a more pronounced way across their organizations.
So I hear two big messages there that I'm going to paraphrase. The first is that you found a problem to solve rather than building a solution in search of a problem. And the second thing is that effectively this could act as thin end of the wedge if you were trying to introduce a culture of AI in a business. Is that a fair summary?
That's a great summary, absolutely. And the culture of AI as a business is really important. So I'm going to use a really good example here. About 8 months ago, going into firms and trying to do meetings with power planning and admin teams, there was a big journey you had to go through to help educate that it wasn't about replacing the humans that are doing the job. And so, coming in and explaining that it's a powerful tool that helps the human do what they do faster and actually focus on the things they're more interested in and take away the mundane, opened up the gates to actually people wanting to test and validate and utilize it. From that, actually, if you think about what we're doing, and you raised an interesting point, Alistair, is we're actually enabling you to actually develop a database about what your clients are invested in. And so often I think data is misunderstood. We think we have lots of data. We don't have lots of data as an industry, and very much advisors don't have much data in their company about their customers' investments. And so we have that data stored in lots and lots of different documents, whether that's your own suitability letters, whether that's provider documentation. And so having a utility here that takes unstructured data and gives it structure is the very basis and foundation for what you can then start to build more complex models around to do more complex workflows. And so, yeah, we took a very pragmatic and sensible approach to actually automation in this space.
In the demo that I hope people will watch in the video, you talked a bit about how quickly the tool can extract unstructured information to create a structured file. And you were talking in terms of, 1 to 2 minutes to extract the information, 1 to 2 minutes to process it, can then be uploaded to the CRM. So can you share results on the impact that you're having in businesses in terms of time savings, efficiency? What are the metrics that they're using to measure success?
Absolutely. So I think it varies depending on the size of firm, of course. But if I take your average advisory practice, you're probably doing in excess of 20 LoAs on a monthly basis, and this is for your standard size advisory firm. A pension consolidation piece of work will require you to have potentially 2 to 3 different policies that you have to read through. It can take a trained admin person anywhere between 20 to 40 minutes to read through one policy and extract the information that the power planner needs to have to effectively do the recommendation. And so we're already taking 40 minutes of work down to under 5 minutes per policy. So you do the math on that, and we're doing that at a price point that's under £4 per checklist. It's AI priced correctly, and it's saving hours of time on a weekly basis for advice practices.
The promise here is great, right? You've got a problem that is a problem that can be solved, that you're helping to solve. The secret sauce, I think, for making this work in the long term has got to be CRM integration. And I guess I'm thinking, what is the long-term goal for you guys? What are you comfortable in this lane? Are you just going to go, right, we're going to integrate with the CRMs and that's all we're going to do? Or are there bigger ideas to roll on from this point for you?
Yeah, so I think from the get-go, it's integrations is the top priority for me. We can help alleviate the bottlenecks in the workflow, but actually the input and the output piece and the rekeying is actually a big part of that time save as well. So that connected proposition is paramount to my strategy for the next 6 months. So we're already on IntelliFlow. We'll be coming on to Planner as of next week, Xplan, Kuro Time for Advice, and the list will go on. There are two types of integrations. Basic integrations are pulling information and pushing information back. That's great. I want to get to a point of eliminating rekey here. And so actually automatically populating the fields within these CRM systems is actually, I think, the holy grail of that integration. I think that's also important because advisors are using about 13 different tools today on average. I think I got that from one of your reports, Heather. Do we really need another plethora of different AI solutions to add to the mix? I don't believe so. And so I see it as a utility that plugs in and connects different workflows already within a CRM system. Companies spend a lot of time in thinking about their workflows and how they use CRMs. Why can't we be the glue that takes the missing information and populates the piece back in? So that's my direction of travel there. In relation to future work, absolutely, we're building a basis here now of understanding what else we could do, more complex sort of checklists in the market. I do see compliance file check reviews as an avenue I'd like to get into. It's effectively a checklist of checklists. Checklists understand you've got the documents that you need, and then within that, do you have the right information within those documents? But again, it will always be around document processing. We won't move into very, I'd say, populated spaces of suitability letter writing or meeting notes. I think a lot of those toolings are a dime a dozen. This is a core piece of utility that I think can sit across an organization. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that your motivations and the ambition of the business is really helpful. And I want to try to understand the other side of the coin, the advice firms that you're working with. What are they trying to achieve? So obviously, everybody wants to run more efficient businesses, but if they were to get back more time, what are they looking for AI? I mean, it's helping a problem within a business because there's inefficiency, there's risk, et cetera, et cetera. But where I'm getting at is, are they looking to take on more clients? Are they looking to improve job satisfaction? Is it, what are the things that they're trying to achieve in the businesses? What are you hearing?
Yeah, so I think it's all of the above. I think ultimately the key thing is that how can they scale an operation better than they currently do? I see, for every advisor, on average, 2 to 3 types of admin support team that's required. So when you buy a new advisor in, if you're a consolidator, how much extra additional support do you need to actually service that book of business? And it doesn't scale exponentially. And so I think one way of doing that is technology enablement. And so I think, operational efficiency is a key aspect to my play here, right? You want to drive operational efficiencies by making our highly paid humans do what only humans can do. Build customer advocates, get better referrals by having a better customer experience, and remove the time they spend on the mundane tasks that are, to be honest with you, below their pay grade. I think what that does mean is that you can then ultimately take more clients on and scale it with the same human tech stack that you already have. We don't have enough humans in this industry to actually service the broader UK market. And so there is a definite need here that, automation has to be a way of doing that. And it's not to replace the people that we have, it's to do more with the people that we have and service our customers better as a result.
That's really interesting. Thank you. I'm now going to drag us back down to earth as the resident pessimist on the show. And it's my job to ask you about all the things that are going wrong. I think a lot about the risks and the challenges with adoption of AI. We had at our September event, Adrian Hopgood talking about type 1 and type 2 errors, and that's really lodged in my brain, this idea that it isn't just success rate, but it's what's the impact of a false negative and what's the impact of a false positive, and how does that affect the overall workflow. And I suspect you've come up against this as you've been training the models and building them out. So it'd be really interesting to hear, like, what do you see the challenges there? What are you trying to put in place to mitigate those?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's really nice to get a bit of a technical question in the industry. And so, just to kind of take a step back, what is a false positive, right? And a false negative. So a false positive occurs when the system incorrectly identifies something that isn't actually there. So for example, in our use case or in our product, the AI, if it mistakenly extracts a piece of data like a policy number, and that policy number isn't in fact in the document. It's also another way of talking about a hallucination, effectively. A false negative is a slightly different problem in that it happens when the system actually fails to pick up information that is there. And so both of these are problems for our workflow. You want to ensure that the information that you need is given end of the day. And so there's a number of different ways you can mitigate to it. We approach the world of machine learning and LLMs with a RAG model. So what that is, retrieval, augmentation, generation. It's an approach by which you can ensure that the models actually have been trained on a pattern that you've learned, but also that it retrieves the right bit of information in the input section correctly. So that helps mitigate some of these hallucinations and some of these risks of false positives and false negatives. What I'd add to that furthermore is that we actually have a very sophisticated rig that sits underneath the application. And so we have the ability to benchmark, rank, and score many different large language models. We don't just use one large language model. We have in excess of 6 to 12 that we could use for any different type of question. You know, large language models sometimes are great for certain things. And so understanding which ones to use when is important, and have the ability and the mechanism in place to validate and check that you're correct every single time. And so that happens in the background automatically. And so these confidence scores, the ranking system is very important. And then the final piece I'll add to this is just having the feedback loop, having that human in the center of this process where you can source the document, actually have the human eyeball it and validate that it's in fact correct. That's the final stop, shall we say, of ensuring that you actually avoid these false positives and false negatives.
So I think it's really, really helpful to help people think, but when they're assessing, because you know you've worked in the sector for 10 years, right? For the rest of us, what questions do you think that potential buyers of your services should be asking? What are the things that they're not asking when they're doing the RFQ or RFP, when they're going through their due diligence? What are the things they're not asking you that they should be? Or the things that questions they're asking that maybe they're asking the wrong way or interpreting things a bit differently than they should?
Yeah, it's a great question, Heather. I do an awful lot on trying to kind of educate around how your standard RFIs that you have are built around software. They're not aligned to actual AI-based products. And so we actually have our own standard due diligence document that we've completed that we share with our customers as well to go a bit deeper. But let me give you some of the pieces that I think are relevant. So data security and privacy is paramount. And so in order to understand what data is being shared outside of the application, you have to ask the question, what models are you using? And if you are using the models, are they locally hosted within the application? It's very easy today to build a ChatGPT and to utilize ChatGPT API. The reality is you're already in breach of your GDPR and data sensitivity rules because you've sent it out to a third party in an open public domain. So understanding the models that are being used and how they've orchestrated the models within the application and the infrastructure is important. I also think what I'm seeing more and more is people not fully asking the questions around third-party tooling. Third-party tooling is not a problem per se. We use Stripe for our account management and billing. You know, it's no customer sensitive information within that from a client perspective. And so why would you want to build your own payment service tool when you can bring that in and it's much more effectively robust than I would ever build it in any case. But, you know, think about if you are using OCR technology, that OCR, is it embedded within your application, or have you, by virtue of actually utilizing something to just scrape the information, already been in breach of your GDPR? So you've got the model, you've got the third-party tooling. And another question that I think people don't ask enough about is actually data anonymization. People say they anonymize the data. In technical terms, there's lots of different ways that you can anonymize data. How are people doing that? It can be a double-edged sword, right? Poor anonymization techniques can still lead to data leaks. You can reverse engineer anonymizations quite easily from a technical and cybersecurity standpoint. And so for me, I don't want to take any risks, and I don't believe anonymization is the answer here. I think it's about building your solution with all of the necessary core components embedded within the software in a secure, scalable fashion on a UK server. Furthermore, I think actually larger firms that think about utilizing these technologies, the easiest option is ultimately to have a service that you can port directly into your own infrastructure and into your own sort of data sort of security parameters. And with LoA, we do work with larger enterprises and can port it as a Dockerized container inside their own cloud. And so that's the whiter than white version of actually being able to utilize a solution like LoA.
Thank you. It's a really interesting point. I would do wonder actually, as more is written and talked about, the sort of the centralized nature of the large language models, whether people are going to start. It's like running your own server. I remember the days where we used to run our own server. You know, we might be back running our own AI models internally and refusing to use anyone else's. Thank you. That's been a really interesting kind of deep dive. And you did a really good job of explaining the technical concepts along the way as well, which is helpful. We've got a sort of final section now, really, on rapid fire questions. Um, so we ask the same few questions to each guest. The first I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to change this rule slightly. So we've had a rule that says no meeting notes as an answer for how firms get started. But considering that you have like an easy to start with tool, I'm going to change the rule and say you're not allowed to recommend re-LOA.
That
So
was exactly what I was
other
going to do.
other than re-LOA, if a firm is interested in getting started of understanding or using or just getting to grips with the concepts of AI, what would be a great first step?
I think if I can't use real OA, which would be my first step, I would just use a transcription service. Sorry, you said I can't use a transcription service as an option.
That's all right. Meeting notes are okay. We took that out of the rules, so you got to skirt around them. And you mentioned real away, which I've just done again for you. So there you go. um, and in terms of an application that's made a big difference in your day to day, how are you using AI? What's made a big difference in your day to day?
Yeah, so I like to think about AI with things that I don't do really well myself. And so I use Canvas a lot for my marketing and the development of my sort of digital assets. It's got some great AI enabled tooling there. So yeah, Canvas is a great marketeer's tool for content.
Excellent. And we're a podcast. We're interested in podcasts. We like reading too. I'm hoping you might be interested in one or the other. So, what would be
Yeah.
your podcast or book recommendation around the topic of tech and AI?
Yeah, so I love big picture piece around AI, having been studying it for the last 10 years. And so a great book is AI Superpowers by Q Fei Lee. It's a really must read. And it talks about the evolution of where AI is moving and who's controlling it in the globe.
Great. I've not heard of that one. Thank you. That's a new one for me. We'll put a link in the show notes to Canva, which I'm an avid user of as well, and to AI superpowers. That sounds great. Right. Biggest AI fail. Mine, as listeners will know, was a cake. What is your big AI fail?
Mine's probably a previous product that I launched and developed in the market. So I had built a product called Stream AI in Germany, which was specifically for manufacturers. We got funded by the European Union and made a number of mistakes. It wasn't the right problem that was scalable. It needed high customization for every customer we went to. And so by virtue of that, it had died a death before it began. And secondly, we realized that actually the engineers didn't want that to be automated. It was their core USP within their organization. And so think about the right problem and the right tool to the right problem. And if in fact the problem needs to be automated at all, that was the real lesson that I learned from that mistake.
Thank you. That's a great answer and very honest as well. Thanks. Well, Gary, it's been really great having you. Thank you so much. Listeners will probably not know because of our great producer, but we've had lots of tech problems this episode. So thanks for bearing with us through those too. Yeah, thanks very much. Great to have you.
Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Gary. That was a great demo on the video and a great conversation with Gary, somebody who's really knowledgeable about AI. And I thought it was really interesting, his comments about why the LoA process, because that was something I've been curious about for a long time, because it's so specific and he's not been in the UK financial advice market for a while. So, so I thought that was really interesting. Three things for me, and then I want to hear from you, Alistair. I thought the thing that really stuck with me or sticks with me after that conversation was actually something that Gary said at the very end, and it was about his the biggest AI fail, and it was the service that he launched in Germany that was the wrong product, that wasn't solving a problem, and I think that we always learn more from our mistakes than we do from our successes, and he's obviously reflected on that, and it's such a new category, a new sector, that I don't think there's many people who would have those scars of an AI solution that didn't have that product market fit. So I think that actually is really reassuring to me about the direction of the business probably. In the demo, he talked about how they'd built a solution to solve a repeatable process, and talked about it as a gateway use case. And you can see those learnings from that AI fail that he talked about coming through there. But that repeatable process and making that something that you can get AI, get people started in businesses.
Yes, Heather. I think that coming in with a really clear idea of what problem you're trying to solve has really helped the clarity of what Gary's got to offer, right? And LoA. I felt that he was really focused on this 90% success rate. Like there's quite a high bar for that, and I think that's really helpful. Other things that he mentioned that I thought were quite important was one around data sharing and sort of data sanctity, and this idea of sort of owning your data and knowing where it's going, particularly because client data of this kind is so sensitive. So I thought Gary had some good things to say about that. But also the idea of empowering people in the businesses to not have to be doing work that's kind of below their pay grades. I really like that idea, 'cause that's the sales pitch as a business owner trying to get my team to engage. I need to explain to them why this new piece of tech, why this new thing. I'm not trying to replace you. I'm just trying to help you concentrate on the bits of work that you're enjoying, rather than reading from one document and transposing onto another. So no, I thought all of that was really interesting.
It's really interesting, isn't it? It's the consistent theme through the season, is it? From, what Johnny was talking about from Lyft, what Alan was talking about from Advisory AI. I don't really know what the people from Notebook, or the bots from a Notebook LM were talking about, but but it's always comes back to the people, right? That you have to bring them on the journey. So listeners, check out LoA. And find out what Gary's up to. Thank you to our sponsors, Aviva, Salesforce, SS&C, and Fidelity. Thank you to Artemis Irvin, who does a fantastic job sorting out all the tech glitches, and there were many, many today. And see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, Alistair.
Thank you, Heather. See you soon.